To part 2 of week 2. We're so sorry we had to cut you off a little short last week, but that's because what we're talking about in this discussion is just so deep and so big we had to break it up. We want to give a special hello to people watching across America and across the world. We know that these conversations are looked forward to. We look forward to them as well. And joining me again to continue this great dialogue and conversation is a good friend of mine, Adria McKnight. She's an attorney here in Houston. We have Clarence Singleton here. He's worked with the singles group at LightHouse. We have Miss Tanya Randall, who's the director of ministries at LightHouse, and of course, the man of the hour, Senior Pastor Keion Henderson, to kind of break down some stuff for you and hopefully help you get your own dialogue started with your family and friends. I want to ask, and each of you can look in the camera and answer this in terms of justice. Talk about a specific example, whether it's justice or injustice that kind of, resonated with you. It could have been made you upset, or it could have been something that you were proud of, saying, you know what, the right thing was done. I was so happy for that moment. So yeah, y'all look in the cameras. And
one of the situations I faced that really brought racism to reality to me is when a few years, I think it was Allison, when like all the power was out and everything, you couldn't find ice anywhere. And so I was headed to go get some ice, and they said, oh, they got some in Pasadena. I don't know if y'all know about Pasadena like that.
Oh, Pasadena.
Right. Listen, I drove down there, and the lady that I was with at the time, I got out because she wanted some snacks. She complained, I want something to snack. We've been riding. I said, okay, well, let me go in this store. And I'm walking, and I just see a bunch of pickup trucks and a bunch of white men sitting on the back of them and everything. And I look at the name of the store. I think it was called Dusty something. I said, whoa. I said, you know what? You're going to have to be hungry a little longer. So I turned around, going back to the truck, and it was a white guy, older white guy, that parked next to me. And when I was getting in, he said, keep it moving inward. And she said, did you hear him? I said, yeah. What you gonna do? I said, we're gonna keep it moving.
Get up in this car and get up out of here.
And we drove off. Because common sense kicked in and said, listen, all of them, again, I got one gun. They probably got a bunch of them. And then it's gonna be my dead story against theirs. Yeah. So I had to use some sense, but that brought to me reality, like, hey, this stuff is real. And what our ancestors went through or died for, we should not take that in vain. We shouldn't.
Miss Tanny, how about you?
I think when I was in college, I went to Prairie View A&M University, and one of the injustices that launched me, I have the spirit to fight, so I'm always down, like, hey, we finna march. Probably didn't even know what it was for at the time, but one of the things
we need to be best friends.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, I'm with it. I got now. What we doing?
Right.
What happened?
What time?
So, it was about voting. So there was an issue. You know where Prairie View is located. So, but the area around is, mixed, but predominantly Caucasian, and that area. It was about letting college students vote in that city. And that right to do, especially if you were relocated there, so people that moved from a different state and so forth. So they wouldn't allow them to vote there, and so that created a right of March to have the right to vote where you now reside. You are now a resident of the state of Texas, and so there's that, watching that injustice of how they said, no, you can't. You don't live here. You don't do this. But I live here 4 years. This is now by the state law. This is, the law says I'm a resident here. You're charging me a very nice price to be here because I'm now living in your state. So just watching and doing that injustice made me say, okay, this is where I'm in college. I'm supposed to be reading. This is where we now got to learn some stuff, because they will, people will let you, take away your rights when you don't make a stand to say, no, I have the right to do it, and you have to do that with the power force. So that was one place I really saw how unfair, just because they were scared, just because you're now showing. It's over 6,000 students here. They can have some power if they start voting here, and you saw what fear looked like and what they will do with fear.
Yeah, Adria, how about you?
I was still sitting here thinking, I'm like, ooh, let me go last. So there's There's not really one that specifically stands out, but I think just in my life, I'm going to give this example of the fact that my grandfather spent 20 years in prison for murder in Mississippi because he accidentally ran over a white man on a country road as a teenager. He had to be very young. And that's how my family ended up in Michigan, is because someone went down and vouched for him after 20 years, and they let him out, and they said, if we ever catch you, you will die. So they ended up in Michigan. And so my mom always says, isn't it amazing to think about the fact that her father spent 20 years in prison because he couldn't get a fair trial. My grandmother only went to the 3rd grade, and then boom, you have a grandchild who is a lawyer, who goes to court every day to help people, just like my granddad, who didn't have a fair shot. And so I always like to use that story because I think it just really goes to show how everything is full circle. You know, I've now represented so many different types of people, including, ironically, members from the Aryan Nation, right? And I mean, to me, that's crazy because we don't know who our clients are until we get the files. Right. And so I opened the file and I said, oh, I see you're a documented gang member, because that's what they call them, you know, in jail. And he looked at me like, you know, what is she gonna do? And I'm like, I see you're a documented gang member. Let's talk about that. And he says, yeah, I am. And I'm like, okay, so how's that gonna affect us in this relationship? Is it gonna be a problem? And he said, no, it's not. I said, okay, I'm glad we're on the same page. And so I was able to use that as a teachable moment where he and I would have never crossed paths ever, but for him needing my assistance. And so I just, again, it really shows that when you're in these positions, you really have the opportunity to use what happened in the past and really use it as a stepping stone for your future.
Yeah, that's good. For me, I have a million stories, just like Clarence, with him being in the barbershop. You hear and experience so many things. I can't even tell you how much I've seen in my 14 years in television. But one story I'll never forget was in 2009. I was covering a story that went viral and national in Homer, Louisiana. Itty bitty little town divided by railroad tracks. This side of people, you know, these people on this side of town, these people on this side of town. It was maybe like 3,000, maybe not even that many. But it was close to the Arkansas line. I mean, as country and down south as you can imagine. So one day, there's a man who's known to be mute in town. People know him. He was having a barbecue. He was mute. It was dusk. His family was in the yard. Everybody was playing, having a good time. Police come barging through the yard. They claim they were chasing his grandson. Long story short, it wound up with the man being killed, blasted in front of all of his family members, okay? This man is known. He clearly was not a threat. He did not have a weapon. He did not deserve to be slaughtered like that in front of his family members. So, you know, the coverage started, the story began, and the police officers immediately got off by the parish court system. Nobody was surprised by that because this is deep South Louisiana and everybody just kind of knew, like, okay, unfortunately this man may or may not see justice. That's what happened. So they had to bring in the Department of Justice. They had to bring in all these Al Sharpton, all these people came to this itty bitty town of Homer, Louisiana. And I just remember seeing, and this was when I was fresh out of college, I remember seeing for the first time injustice and how it played out and how it made this town and all these people feel. And that was for the first time, too, I'd ever seen the KKK. I was covering an NAACP meeting at a church in town. The KKK was riding around in pickup trucks outside just to intimidate the people there who were trying to organize and figure out how they're going to get justice for this man. So that was the first time I'd ever really seen, I think, tangible. I was like, am I at 19? What is happening here? You know, a woman she was on the council, town council. She said, you know, I asked her when they were voting on a new council member, one had mysteriously died after she asked for the DOJ to come in. We still don't know what happened to that old black woman, but anywho, so they had to vote on a new replacement, and so it was split down racial lines. These folks voted for white folks, these folks voted for black folks. Anyway, so I interviewed her, I said, on her porch, she's had to be like 80. I said, well, ma'am, some would argue that this is racially motivated, your vote. She says, oh, no, honey. I don't have a problem with race at all. I know plenty of good coloreds. I'm sure you're a good colored. And I said, no, ma'am, I don't know what you mean. She's like, well, I'm just saying, like, I don't have a race problem. I've had I've had someone cook for me for 25 years. And so, again, that was the first time I'd had a real experience with just difference in treatment and injustice. So kind of switching to something positive, I think we've all probably seen the movie Just Mercy, right? That is something that I think opened a lot of people's eyes. A lot of people was probably watching for Michael B. Jordan, but, seeing really she laughed and she's like, well, no lies told. Listen. But, it really broke down the true story, right? It was a true book, Bryan Stevenson adapted for film, talking about the Equal Justice Initiative and how they were going and taking steps to basically try to get justice for people who would never see it otherwise, people who've had trumped up charges, people who've had been lied on, people who've had no, witnesses, no anything to help them. And so, and anyone can answer this. That's a positive, right? I mean, there are some things in place. There are initiatives and ministries and things, prison ministry, things that y'all are doing that are kind of putting the groundwork, right?
Right, and I think that's what, being a part of a ministry that Pastor has created in his vision, us being out in prisons, 3 prisons in the city, going into a women's prison, just even his uniqueness in even knowing who to bring on. Like he said, our wealth of knowledge and exposure will help encounter so many people that will come through his ministry, what we've been exposed to help them become stronger. But how we reach people, we're going into the prisons, giving them hope in a different way. And then that hope can tie them to somebody that'll walk in the door that say, hey, I'll help you. Because they can lose hope in there and say, no, I don't want to fight that. I'll just do my time. I don't want to deal with anything, the backlash that can come with even fighting inside those walls. So I do love the idea, love being a part of something this grand now in my life. And being that you now get to touch people in a way to help them have hope in a way by my exposure. And knowing that can help somebody just go a little bit further.
Yeah. Well, if you belong to the Lighthouse family or if you know anything about the church, then you undoubtedly have heard about the Dream Center. That's Pastor Keion's baby. That's his passion project. That's something that's really going to bless so many people in the area. 40,000 square feet of space that's going to just, I think, cover so many different parameters, right? Meeting basic needs, but also providing this jumping off point, the knowledge, the things that you need just to, I like to say, encompass somebody, just cover them. Pastor, talk about that, just because I believe that as we've talked about all night, right, how equity plays into and having equal access to things and resources to things and knowledge can ultimately play a part in getting justice. So talk about that and how you think and hope that that's going to make a dent in that.
I put the church, with the guidance of the Holy Spirit, I put it right where it is intentionally. We used to rent schools, and I wouldn't pick a school that wasn't the byproduct of a high tax-based area where there were neighborhoods to fund that school. The second school that we went into was Summer Creek. It was brand new. The students hadn't even been in the school before we rented it. And we had to get special exception for that, because I knew that a majority of the people that I was leading and are leading are either at or beneath the poverty line in some instance. And I knew one thing: you cannot be what you don't see. So I rented Kingwood High School just so that people could drive past $1 million houses on the way to church, even if they couldn't live in one. I was always strategic. It was never a school in the hood, and I had nothing against it, but I was trying to bring the people up. The building that we're in right now, I've spent more on renovating it than I paid for it, so that when people would come into the building, they would understand what it feels like to be an African American in a facility that wasn't run down and that was brand new. That they could have their wedding in, and it would be state of the art and not be embarrassed about it. And this Dream Center is an extension of that. It's because I don't know, these kids have nowhere to go. They're latchkey kids, so their mom is at work. And the only gymnasium that's in the area is run down. And I made it my business to try to make sure that I introduced our community of people in every location. We've got 4 of them, and all of the buildings are new. Because it's a part of my vision to make sure that the people that I lead can see what greatness looks like, even if they don't go home to it. Because once I expose them to what greatness is in our environment, it makes them go seek it in their own environment.
That's good.
And that's why we called it the Dream Center, so that people can actually come there and dream and then go live out their reality.
Hey everybody, it's giving time. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give unto your bosom. One of my favorite scriptures in the Bible, because it specifically lets me know that if I do A, God will absolutely do B. I believe that this is the season for you to absolutely not to have to worry about money problems. This is the season for you to live in the absolute truth that God will supply all of your needs according to his riches in glory. I'm believing for you to have a season of overflow, and I want you to connect with us today as we all get ready to give together, so that God will be able to open up that window and pour you out a blessing you won't have room enough to receive. All of the instructions on how to do it are coming up on the bottom of the screen right now. This could be the day that changes the rest of your life. If you are faithful over a few things, you read it. God will make you ruler over much. Get ready for much. In fact, I need everybody to type it. Just type much. There you go. I see it coming through there. Say it again, much. Shout it in your house. Wherever you are watching this, I want you to believe God for much and more. It is the Father's good pleasure that you would enjoy the benefits of the kingdom. As we go back to this conversation, I want you to go back to this conversation filled with joy, knowing that you're going to hear what we have to say. But I want you to hear that small, still voice whispering in your ear, hearing what the Spirit is saying to you right now. It's your time to live in overflow. Check this out.
I used to ask people that I interview, young people who were just in trouble, or, they were labeled as thugs on the news. I'm like, I asked one, I said, man, why are you doing what you're doing? He said, ma'am, I'm just a product of my environment. So you change that environment, you change that perspective, you raise that bar, it forces people to come up. So that's going to do life-changing work, for sure.
And I make sure they know what we do. They can tell you, I tell them what it costs. So, because the only way you can get accustomed to big dollars and big numbers is you have to deal with them, and then you lose the fear for them. So it's like buying a first-class ticket. Once you buy it, then that dollar amount subconsciously says to you, it's not as hard as I thought it was. You get over that hump. So we bought a building, 30 acres of land, $6.4 million. When I said that to the people, they thought I was crazy. She was there. They were like, we gonna do what? I work at AutoZone. I work at Taco Bell. We gonna do what? Yeah, we gonna do it, and I'm gonna show you exactly how we gonna do it. Right. So what I did is I introduced them to financial literacy first, because I knew the money was there. I just knew they didn't know how to handle it. And I was a byproduct of that. So we taught financial literacy, showed them where the money was, got the money, and I guaranteed them that whatever they did for God's house, he would do it for their house. And everybody in here, all of these people in here that go to our church can absolutely unequivocally tell you that from the moment they met us in ministry, when we started, everything about their living circumstances, financial stability, and family is innumerable times better. Not because of me. Not because of me, but because of what the Lord showed me to show them. Yeah.
Come on.
You got to do this, though, Clarence. Facts. You got to.
That's a drill move. I love it. Clarence.
Hey, and I'll say this because it's a lot of people that I converse with, even before I went there, but even more so when I went there. And one thing I heard one writer say one time, he said that the church will give you the truth with no love, but the world will give you love with no truth. Yeah. But then when I went to a church that provided both.
Come on. Man.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so when I talk to people, I always tell them, because I'm a fisherman, I tell them, you got to catch the fish before you clean it. And so when people came to LightHouse, it was easy for them to get caught. And he would even reprimand the people that try to have a judgmental perspective to our people. Oh, don't you worry about what she got on or what he got on. No, let's get them in here first, show them love. Yeah. We can work on that stuff later. But let's make sure they got their heart right. Let's make sure that their mind is in a good place. And he prophesied one year just a few years ago, and he said, if everybody come up to this altar for prayer, something like this, said, if you want your own business, you'll have it next year. I'll be doggone. Dream Chasers didn't come that following year. So that's my testimony.
You get to hear so many stories through ministry, how his word, his truth, his being authentic changed their life, you know, because he makes who follows him, his staff, his leadership, hey, you want to treat my people right. Do justice in here before anywhere in God's house. So that justice translates to how we accept people in their stage and where they are, and it's life-changing through ministry. Watching men come into his house, young men, teenage. Sometimes we can't even get the little children to go to little church because they want to hear him. Right. Like his word is it transforms just to their age group. They're like, no, I want to hear Pastor Keion. No, we got a church, a little baby church for you. Yeah. I need to see for the grown people. That connection, because his word can go that high and that low to transform anybody and change their lives. We get calls all the time from people saying, I'm moving to Houston. You know, I sowed a seed and I got this job, or those things through ministry. Mm-hmm. And what we've been able to touch in the community, being connected to women's shelters and feeding, is just watching people transform through love first and God's word, and just an authentic place where you can be yourself is amazing.
That's good. And I can personally testify to, you know, just the spirit at LightHouse. No offense to the first church that I visited when we moved to Houston, but I just didn't feel it. And I kid you not, like the very first time I went to LightHouse, I'm like, this is it. I'm going to join. This is it. It's just, you know, it's just so many life-changing things that are actually acted out. You know, it's one thing to say, oh, you know, come here. You know, you're not going to feel judged. You're not going to feel any of these things, but y'all like walk the walk.
Like this is my second time seeing you. I remember the day you came. I remember you and I'm going to use names to show you how. I remember your husband, they told me his name was TJ. You had a daughter named Ella. I held her. You came with your godfather or uncle, Al Jennings, who's a judge here. You came with him, and you had some other people with you up there. I remember them handing me your baby and praying for them. And I mean what I do. Like, it's my job. I don't just show up. So I have an experience with every person. And I think that a part of what we talk about today is, and I'm not saying that I do it right, because I don't always do it right. I leave that place more times feeling inadequate than I've ever felt feeling adequate. I don't even hear, believe, or see any of the stuff that they say, but it shows you how you can make a change if you just mean to.
Yeah.
I just mean to. I don't know if I always do. I don't know if I always will, but I really mean to. I really, really mean to. And the only reason why we're here filming today is I really hope it helps somebody.
Yeah.
Even if it hurts me. Even if it hurts me. I'm gonna take so much criticism for people because I have people on the other side of the aisle that follow too, so they don't see this. And trying to find and strike that chord and balance where you satisfy both audiences, but this ain't the time to be fair. This is the time to be just.
Right.
That right now black people are in trouble, and we can't ignore that because somebody feels uncomfortable. We're in trouble. There's a crisis. Black men are in trouble. I was watching, have y'all ever saw a show called Narco Wars? Mm-hmm. There's a show. There's a fish, I can't even think of the name of it, but the bladder of the fish is worth $100,000. So the cartel, they getting out of the drug business, they getting into the fish bladder business, because the people in China think that this bladder, once it is dried out, can give you the fountain of youth, and it makes your skin feel good. So people are dying over these fish. And I watched a whole documentary, you can watch it now, a whole documentary by Leonardo DiCaprio on how people all over the world have come together to save a fish. I need that same effort behind saving the black person, the black man, the black woman in particular. And then, once our numbers get back up and we populate, we can go on to the next endangered species. But right now, it's our turn.
I think folks got to start spending time with some black folks. You know, really be able to empathize and come from where they are. ABC ran a special recently, and I think it was just so profound and beautiful. It was a former KKK member. I mean, tatted up, white supremacy symbols all over. And he met somebody, a black man, and became really good friends with him and got to spend time with him. And his whole life changed just by this friendship. And he went through the process of getting the tattoos removed and doing all of that, but just something as simple as being willing to have a conversation. I mean, literally, he went from hardcore, tatted up, flags, just out of control, to his life was changed just like that. So what we're doing is key. And I encourage everybody who's watching to have a conversation. It doesn't mean weakness. I think sometimes, and I have this, viewers come to me all the time. The immediate response and the defense is, if we say something like, well, this black person was unarmed and was killed, probably shouldn't have been. It's like, well, were they doing something? And I don't understand why you're saying Black Lives Matter, because everybody's life matters. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And so do Black lives. Like, black, that has to be included in that, So we have to have those tough conversations, right? And that's what I was going to ask y'all, and whoever can respond, how do we because I think people love to value the virtues of love, right? And truth. I don't lie, or kindness. Maybe some people have that down. But justice and accepting and allowing justice for all people seems to be a tough concept. Like, people are offended if you say, well, okay, well, let the Native Americans have the land that's sacred to them. Don't drill on it. If they say it's sacred to them, let them be. It's like we all just become offended if it's, bringing somebody else up or allowing them to be, treated justly. So how do we go about it, getting people to embrace that virtue as well? Clarence, you look like you got something on your mind.
Well, I'm over here conjuring up some thoughts. But I think the first thing to do is to actually show love. Because I can't really try to get a room full of people to do something if I'm not doing it first. You have to lead by example. And it's a conversation that I have quite often. Man, I can be friends. I am friends with people of all races, but at the same time, I don't have a biased attitude. If you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you're wrong. And so I just try to get people to encourage. And like you just said about the white supremacists and meeting the black guy, I'm like, man, sometimes you out here judging people and you have no idea of how cool they are or how they can even benefit you. So it's just like, just be more open-minded, because don't you become what you're fighting against. And I think that's key.
That's profound. Adria, what do you think? I mean, obviously, you deal with justice every day. You deal with injustice every day. How do you think we can go about starting to incorporate that, or getting people to understand that the value of justice?
I think sometimes you have to meet people where they are. And likewise, I don't think that black people should have to constantly readjust themselves to meet other people and educate them. But I also think sometimes we need to be open to having hard conversations with people who look different from us, and challenging their beliefs and challenging their opinions, and actually having a free-flowing conversation where it's like, I'm not judging you, I'm really trying to understand you, and vice versa. And so I think that is always a great starting point. That's something that I'm trying to do myself with these people at court. I've been trying with my colleagues.
I'm trying, Lord.
They challenge me sometimes, but I understand that everybody, especially in Texas, I'm from the North, it's different here. And so I understand that some people really come from a place of ignorance. And I don't even know if they want to necessarily stay there, but they've never had the opportunity to have an open, judgment-free type of conversation, to ask the questions that they want to ask, and try to understand where, our perspective come from. Just like the whole Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. I have that conversation all the time. And so I think that I always try to be the type of person where people feel comfortable enough to come to me to have these conversations, because I'm going to educate you. And so I hope that other people take the same position in just being a place where people can learn.
Yeah, I used to be invited to a Ramadan dinner every year when I worked in Florida. I'm not Muslim, I'm Christian. And this was, something that I never missed. Every time I was invited, I would go, because the people who were hosting it, one was a Turkish immigrant, his wife was Filipino, there was somebody else from Kyrgyzstan that was there. Like, it was just the most beautiful, diverse thing. And so I was intentionally trying to have an open mind and conversation. And I learned so much, and I think that's kind of like where we start, right? I wasn't afraid to educate and hear a different side or a different perspective. I thought it was great. It was one of the best times I've ever had, and it wasn't my belief. It wasn't, but as Clarence said, it opened with love. There was so much love in that room, and I got to hear an immigrant perspective. I got to hear a teacher who fled from Turkey and was jailed because they simply were teaching public school students math, and they thought they were secretly teaching them something against the government, and literally had to flee for his life, and so I think it helps me become a better person and a better journalist and have an overall perspective. Ms. Tanya, what do you think? How do we go about this great justice movement?
My thoughts are more internal. I think, as Pastor said, the conversation can start with us first, because the bridge between their sides sometimes is so small, because it's just a common denominator, just figuring out that common denominator on the other side through just, we're still a person. But on our side, it's a lot of conversations that have to happen within us. There's so many variants of us understanding us that it has to start on our side. That makes that conversation on that side a little bit easier. When you know you, that conversation with them is easier. You're not on guard when you know you. When you are solid in who you are, I wasn't uncomfortable going into white America and corporate America. I knew me. Now, there was a variance of me, but you knew you. I was able to learn me because of being around African, all my colors and the shades of me and the variants. Meeting a black person from Omaha, Nebraska. How y'all get up there? But it was a different version of me, Her version of me, Texas and of a black person from Texas is different. But going into that place, so I think starting there doesn't always have to go talking to that side first. It's time to heal us inside of here, because there's so many variants of conversations that have to happen here, because we don't know. Everybody doesn't know their history. They don't know where it starts. We can talk about it, heal it, and then that side, probably there's conversations that can happen where they want to know you more, because you're not so on guard, because you're comfortable with who you are, all the imperfections of who you are. It makes a conversation a lot more easier to be a part of, because it can get difficult. But when you don't know you and you're not comfortable with you, and you're always feel like you're trying to justify everything that they say is wrong with you, that conversation on the other side is too hard.
That's good. And you touched on something, and this need to be a segment one day, and Pastor can certainly attest to this. We have so much healing that needs to be done in the black community. Let's just be honest about it, right? We're upset. Daddy wasn't there. I don't like the way my mama talked to me. I feel like she didn't value my dreams. I feel like, I didn't get a fair shake at this, so I'm mad at the world. There's so much healing that needs to be had, right? Therapy. Say it again. Therapy.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this candid conversation. I would say we are all leaving more blessed, more enlightened, and certainly have just kind of gotten to the surface and beyond. And we hope that you guys got something out of it too. I would say for all of us that we're always available to talk even further. We love stuff like this, and we hope that you tune in continuously for this Tackle the Tech series. And remember, if you can check out something for Black History Month and get a little bit more enlightened, even if you are Black, do so. We'll see you next time.
Listen, we have created a way for all of you all to connect with us online, whether you live in the city of Houston, out of the city of Houston, whether you're in another country. We've created a platform called LightHouse 2.0. And it is nothing more than my way of connecting to you wherever you are. So right now they're getting ready to put a link up on the screen, and you're going to be able to go to that link, to that place, and say you want to be a part. Come check us out. We got a lot that we've given, and we got a lot more for you. I cannot wait to see you at 2.0.